Specialized cells in human body. So we have some cells that are specialized, which is meaning that they have some specific adaptations that they can then perform different kind of functions in the human body. So we will be talking about red blood cell, muscle cell, nerve cell, ciliated epithelial cell, white blood cell, sperm cell, and egg cell. So let's start first with the red blood cell. So basically, that you can understand the different adaptation of the cell, you need to know what is actually their function. So when we are talking about red blood cells, we need to know what is their function. So their function is basically to transport oxygen to different parts of the body, or basically to the different cells in human body. This oxygen inside of the red blood cell needs to bind on something. And here is also really important that you understand that the shape of red blood cell also helps to give, let's say, more space so that these oxygen molecules can bind. This specific shape of red blood cell actually gives them bigger surface area, which actually later will give them more opportunity to bind oxygen. But that's not everything. It's not just their shape. They also have something that is called hemoglobin. Inside of them, hemoglobin is basically a molecule which is made of hem and globin. Globin is a protein and hem is iron, like metal. So when this metal and protein globin combine, you get a molecule which is called hemoglobin. This hemoglobin has like 4 connections on which these oxygen molecules actually can connect or bind so that they can then be transported in different parts of the body. It's not only that. If you notice, inside of red blood cell is here this hemoglobin. So if you notice here, there is no nucleus inside of the red blood cell, which is let's say not so specific, because when we talk about different cells and different cell organelles, we mentioned that human body has the nucleus in their cells. But red blood cell is specific one. This one do not have a nucleus, which is meaning that inside of the red blood cell you don't have a DNA or genetic material. The reason is because in this case, when you don't have a nucleus, the red blood cell will have more space inside so that more hemoglobin can be inside, or second word, that more oxygen molecules can actually bind. Concentration of hemoglobin in human bodies mostly related sometimes when people have anemia or different kind of symptoms. So basically, when they're taking the blood samples, they're checking the concentration of hemoglobin in your blood, and this is basically how much, in the end, oxygen can be bonded to the red blood cells. So one more time, 2 specific things regarding red blood cell. First, you must know red blood cell, they are carrying oxygen or transporting oxygen in human body. They have a specific biconcave shape. Why they have this kind of shape? Because in this case they will increase the surface area so that more oxygen can be connected or binded. We also mentioned they do not have nucleus, which gives more space so more oxygen can be binded. The next one that we will be talking about is muscle cell. So this is heart or cardiac muscle. Then here you have skeleton muscle, and here is smooth muscle. So the point of the story, what these 3 diagrams have in common. If you notice here, when arms go up, the muscle will contract. When arms go down, the muscle will relax. If you notice the heart, it has the similar property like the skeletal muscle. Also here in the digestive system, inside of intestines, you see the movement of digested food, so which is meaning that basically also these muscles must contract or relax. So what's the point of the story? The point of the story that in all 3 diagrams muscles contract. So why this is important? Because they get shorter. When they contract, they get shorter, and when they relax, basically what are they doing? They're coming back to their normal length or size. This is especially important when you want to describe adaptation of muscle cells, of which they are basically made. So again, here is the heart or cardiac muscle, and here is the skeleton muscle, and here is the smooth muscle. So basically, we mentioned that what they have in common, that they need to contract. Now, the point of the story, what is their purpose in human body? So the skeleton muscle is attached to the skeleton, and basically this contraction and relaxation is helping human body to move. The cardiac or heart muscle pumps blood. In this way, it's helping to transport different kind of substances inside of the body. And this one, in part of intestines or digestive system, it actually helps with digestion and, of course, collection of different nutrients and movement of substances. Then, can you remember maybe when you learn about cell organelles, what is the name of cell organelle which is responsible for production of energy inside of the cell? I will give it 6 seconds. So the name is mitochondria or mitochondrion. So mitochondrion inside of this cell organelle will happen something that we call cellular respiration, which is meaning that the glucose which will come from the digestive system will combine with the oxygen which will come using red blood cells and blood, will enter in the cell, and when these two combine inside of the mitochondria, the energy will be produced. But in this process, it's not only energy that is produced, also you have some things that are not needed for the cell, like carbon dioxide, which then needs to go out, and water. Okay, the second question for you. Which micro molecule will be responsible for contraction in muscle cells? So carbohydrates, proteins, or lipids? I will give you one hint. So remember what most people who are doing some kind of exercise, what type of food they are eating and which supplements they are taking. 6 seconds. Okay, so the answer is proteins. So definitely muscles need protein so that they can contract or relax more. Then the next one. Basically, the point of the story, for every contraction that muscles do, they need energy and, of course, proteins, which will change the shape of the muscle. So what is here important? If you will ever have in your test question like which cell in human body have the most mitochondria inside, definitely you can say muscle cell, because they need a lot of energy to do these contractions or movement. So to summarize regarding muscle cell, what is important regarding muscle cell and how they're actually adapted to perform their functions. So like we mentioned, they need to have many mitochondria. Why? Because they need a lot of energy that they can do all these contractions. Also, they need to have proteins. Why? Because these proteins will also help them with contraction. Okay, the next one that we will talk about is nerve cell. So what you can see here, what is going on? So one person is sitting, a doctor is having some kind of equipment and hitting this person's leg. So the question is, why does he immediately move his leg in this situation? So basically, how do we call this? This is called reflex. If you had any time in your life situation, let's say that you move your hand without controlling it, like something is going on, so you immediately move your hand or leg or something before you actually think about it. So the point of the story here, who is controlling this? Our nervous system. And this nervous system is basically responsible for protecting us in different kind of situations. So what is going on here? So basically, let's say that in this case, like we have here, so this doctor will, let's say, little bit hit the leg of this person. So I will just wait that this one comes down. And what will happen in this case? When he hits the person's leg, you have muscles here. in these muscles you have effectors which actually will receive this kind of impulse that something is going on. Then this impulse will trigger something that we call the sensory nerve. This sensory nerve will send information to the spinal cord. Spinal cord is in our column, vertebral column. Then in vertebral column, they will say, okay, something is going on, we need to move this leg, and then the spinal cord will send information to the motor nerves. Like motor nerves, something needs to move, right? So the motor nerves will then come to the muscle, trigger the muscle, send the impulse to the muscle, and leg will move. So when you're explaining actually what is going on, you need a time to explain it. But in real life, if you notice here, it happened really fast. And that's really important that it needs to happen really fast, because in this case, our body actually is trying to protect us. One good example is, for example, for our eyes. Did you ever have a feeling like when you're driving a bicycle, running, walking, something, and some fly or something is going directly in your eye, and you don't even have a time to think about, you immediately close your eye. So this is also one good example how we can say that this nervous system is trying to protect us in some kind of way. So basically, how all this story is connected with nerve cells. So nervous system is made of nerve cells. So and nerve cells needs to have some kind of adaptation that all these that I explained before can actually happen in human body. So, but that you can actually explain that, and if you understand my story, how you will define actually what's the function of a nerve cell. So first thing that you need to think about, what is the function of the cell that you want to describe. So like we mentioned, basically a nerve cell is the one who needs to carry some kind of impulses around the body. So these impulses we call the nerve impulses. So if you know that the function of this cell is to carry something, in our case impulses, then you can assume what kind of adaptation this cell actually needs to have and how actually is adapted. So the second question is, how is adapted to this function? So it needs to have some kind of adaptation which actually will help this cell to carry all this information. So here you have one example of nerve cell. So if you notice here, there are different, let's say, parts. So this one looks like a head, and you have inside different kind of organelles. What is here important? Do you notice here this is a nucleus, which is meaning that nerve cell has a nucleus. If it has a nucleus, inside of the nucleus is genetic material, which we call DNA, or the big boss. But also there are different organelles inside. There's also mitochondria, etc. So definitely nerve cell has DNA or genetic material. Then you have here some like hands or like trees, how they have. So, and this looks like a tail, but they have their scientific or specific name. So first, this part here is called dendrite, which is meaning that these parts here, they will receive the nerve impulses and they will pass them then next to the different part of the cell. So one more time, dendrite, they're collecting or receiving basically the nerve cell impulses that will be sent from another cell. So they are the ones who are receiving impulses. Then this impulse will need to go through this axon. Axon basically will carry nerve impulses further. Axon, if you notice here, this like looks like sausages here, but they're not sausages. They are basically protection of the axon, because axon is carrying nerve impulses like electricity. You know how you have a cable. Inside of the cable you have a wire made basically of copper. Copper is a conductor of electricity, leading electricity, and you need to have some kind of protection around so that it can protect not just you, also devices. This protection is this like a rubber. And something similar is regarding nerve cells. So they don't have a rubber, but they have something that is called myelin sheath, which will be like insulator of the axon. And the last part here, this like ends, this is called the axon terminal. This is where this nerve cell will have connection with other cell. Here is really important. that you understand, they're not directly connected. So another cell will not directly attach to this part. They have like a space, like a gap between different cells. This gap usually is called synapses. Synapses is where then they will release different chemicals, and in this way they will communicate. So really important, nerve cells are not connected. So they have gap or space between them. If you want to know, the space is called synapses. So to summarize this, adaptation regarding nerve cell, what they need to have? They need to have long fibers. Why? These long fibers will allow them to carry different kind of impulses, electrical impulses, up and down the body. What else do they need to have? They need to have branching dendrites. Why? Because these are, let's say, connections to other nerves or muscles. So one more time, they need to have long fibers and branching dendrites. Then the next one that we will be talking about is ciliated epithelial cell. So you have two diagrams here. So when you observe them, you see some kind of hairy-like structures here, hairy-like structures here. Here some, let's say, like molecules are moving. Also, these some particles are moving. So now, basically, I tell you the answer, but what these two diagrams, what they have in common. If you observe these, like hair-like structures, they're actually helping to move something, right? In this right diagram and also in the right diagram. So what they have in common. So in this case, these ciliated, let's say, these hair-like structures you can find in the oviduct, which is part of the female reproductive system. And in this case, it moves eggs inside of the oviduct, which is meaning, second words, their adaptation is actually helping to move these eggs. Then here on the right part, you have movement of mucus in your nose. So these hair-like structures actually are helping to move that mucus in the nose. So in both cases, they are helping to move something, either the egg in the reproductive system or either the mucus in your nose. Basically, here we are talking about ciliated epithelial cells. So, where you can find them? They are not just in the female reproductive system inside of the oviduct, they are not just in your nose, also they can be in different parts of the respiratory system like bronchi, trachea, then also not just in female reproductive system like oviduct, it can be also in the uterus, it can be also in the male reproductive system like epididymis and vas deferens. So they are not just in only one or two organs, they can mean more different organs or organ systems in human body. Then, how actually they are adapted that they can move something? So they need to have some kind of adaptation which will actually help them to move. If you remember when we talk about muscles, we said that muscles, they need to contract and relax. So this is a lot of movement. And for a lot of movement, they need a lot of energy. Because of a lot of energy, they need a lot of mitochondria, because mitochondria is cell organelle in which this energy will be produced. So if I tell you that ciliated epithelial cell, they also move a lot because they are trying to move something. So what do you think? Do they actually need a lot of mitochondria or mitochondrion? 6 seconds. The answer is yes, definitely they need. So because they move a lot, actually they are helping to move something. That they can do that, they need a lot of energy. That they can get a lot of energy, they need to have a lot of mitochondria in which this energy will be produced. But they don't have only mitochondria, they also have nucleus in which is DNA or genetic material, and they also have, of course, cytoplasm and the cell membrane. On the top of these cells, you have these cilia, basically this it looks like hair-like structures, so which actually help them to move. So like we already mentioned, what is the function of this cell? We mentioned that the function is to move something in one direction. We mentioned the movement of mucus in the nose or movement of the egg in the oviduct. So if you know the function, so the function is movement of substances, then it will be much easier to explain how actually they are adapted for this function. So how they are adapted. So they must have these like hair-like structures which we call cilia, which actually help them to move the substances. And of course they need to have a lot of mitochondria which will actually produce enough energy that they can actually move. So to make it simple, ciliated epithelial cell, they have two main adaptations. So they have tiny hairs called cilia, which help them to move substances, and they have mitochondria, which actually gives them energy that they can actually move. Then the next one, we have white blood cell. So white blood cell, also called leukocytes, their function in the body, in the organism, is basically to fight against different kinds of organisms that are causing diseases. The organism that is causing some kind of disease we call the pathogen. Regarding these white blood cells, we have, let's say, different types. These different types, they have, of course, different names and different roles or functions in the body, or the way how they are fighting. So, for example, this one here, it's called neutrophils. So these are basically, we say, the first one that will respond to bacteria or virus. Then you have the eosinophils. Eosinophils are known for the role in the allergy symptoms. Usually the people who have problem with allergy, if they take their blood sample, this one can be really high. Then basophils. Basophils are known for their role in asthma. So they are the one who can actually show some kind of situations regarding asthma. Then these two are showing or representing the ones that we called lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are they are basically fighting different kind of infections. How they are fighting against infections, they are producing something that is called antibodies. So basically the concentration, or if the concentration of lymphocytes is in blood sample really high, this is meaning that body is trying to fight against some kind of infection. And the last one are monocytes. Monocytes, their function is basically to clean up some dead cells that are inside of the organism. But that they can all do these kind of functions, they need to have some kind of adaptation. So how they're adapted, they are capable to change their shape. So which is meaning that they can squeeze out of the blood vessels and take in the pathogens or the organism which is causing the disease. This is one adaptation. Second adaptation is that they can actually produce something that is called antibodies and antitoxins, which is meaning in this way they are helping to protect human body regarding different pathogens. So to summarize, white blood cell, how they are adapted to the role. So they have a regular shape. So irregular shape basically help them change shape to squeeze out of blood vessels and get to the site of the infection. Infection is basically place where is a lot of these bad, let's say, harmful organisms inside of the body. Then they have also cytoplasm, which can flow, making it possible for the cell to change shape, surround and engulf bacteria, which is meaning basically the second words, they can change the shape. Why they need to change the shape? So that they can intake the bacteria, let's say, which is causing harm to the body inside of their cell. And what is also important, they increase in number to fight diseases. So like I mentioned, if you are sick, your body will produce more of these white blood cells, and some of the blood cells will produce antibodies or antitoxins, which will help to defend your body. And if someone take your blood sample, they will be able to see that the concentration of white blood cell is really high if you have some kind of infection. Then the next one, we will talk about sperm cell. So sperm cell, also called male sex cell. So the function, first you need to know what is really important. Of course, here you have male. So the sperm cell, it can be only found in males. and it's part of the male reproductive system. So what is the function? If we are talking about reproductive system, so definitely something is connected with reproduction or the offsprings, and regarding babies and everything else. So the point of the story here, the sperm cell, the function is it needs to travel, so that can travel and fuse with an egg cell to perform the function or process which we call fertilization. So that in the end, like we are all formed, so that you can have the new child, even the new cat, the baby cat, the baby dog, never mind. So you need to have a male and a female sex cell. So the male sex cell it's called sperm cell and comes from the father, and the female sex cell is called egg cell and comes from the mother. So these two needs to combine that in the process which is called fertilization, and in this process which is called fertilization, when these two combine, you get a new cell which is called zygote. Then this zygote will start growing, second words, multiplying these cells, and when it grows so big, in the end, you'll get something that we hold, let's say, baby. So that all this can happen, first this sperm cell must come to the egg cell. So that this sperm cell can actually come to the egg cell, it needs to have some kind of different adaptations which will actually help this cell to travel. Why this is important? Because this fertilization or this reaction when sperm cell will connect with the egg cell will happen in female reproductive system in one specific part, which is called oviduct or fallopian tube. So which is meaning in second words that this sperm cell has a really long path to travel to come to this oviduct or fallopian tube, and that it can actually combine with the egg cell. So that all this can happen, it needs to have really lot of different kind of adaptations. So first of all, for movement, it needs something for movement. For this movement, this will be something that we call a tail. So the tail will be the one which will help this sperm cell to move. Then also, because we are again talking about movement, like we mentioned movement in ciliated cells, like we mentioned movement in muscles, which is meaning it needs to have a lot of mitochondria. This mitochondria will produce them a lot of energy. So this mitochondria will be placed in the middle part of the sperm cell. And then here on the top, we have something that is called head. Inside of the head, it has a nucleus, or inside of the nucleus basically is DNA or genetic material. This is really important because this is genetic material that will be combined with the female genetic material. So this is DNA of father inside. And on the top of the head is something that is called acrosome. This acrosome later will help when this sperm cell needs to combine with the egg cell. It will help to break down one layer of the egg cell so that actually this genetic material can enter inside of the egg cell. So shortly, how this sperm cell is basically adapted to the function. So it needs to have long tail, which help them to move. It needs to have a lot of mitochondria because they need energy for movement, and acrosome, which actually will be enable the sperm cell to break down the protective layer on the egg cell, and that this DNA can actually go inside of the cell. Then the next one we will have, and the last one regarding humans, it will be egg cell. So egg cell is also called ova or ovum, and this is female sex cell, which is meaning that is part of female reproductive system. The function is to be fertilized by the sperm cell, which is meaning inside of the female cell you also have a nucleus in which is DNA or genetic material from the mother. So if you notice here, it's not really just good comparison, but egg cell is much bigger than the sperm cell. And it's actually good reason why it's so big, because it needs to have a lot of cytoplasm inside of this one, because in this cytoplasm it will be lots of nutrients which will help later for developing the embryo, or in the end we are talking about the baby. Also, so that it can connect and later to help to grow the more cells, and in the end the baby, it needs to have one layer around the cell. So this layer basically we call like jelly coat or zona pellucida. So because of this layer, the sperm cells must have this acrosome on the top of the head, so that can break this layer, enter inside. What is here actually specific? It's specific that when one sperm cell enter, so this like zona pellucida is changing her structure so that when another sperm cell come, that cannot use, let's say, the same strategy to enter inside. Why this is important? Because if this zona pellucida or jelly coat will enter millions of sperm cells inside, it will be huge chaos. So in the point of the story, in the end, this nucleus or DNA or this one egg cell actually needs one sperm cell or one nucleus with DNA to enter inside and join with the DNA of female. Of course, sometimes, because you heard about twins and everything, so sometimes can happen that even more sperm can enter. But the point of the story, this zona pellucida or jelly coat actually will change the structure when one sperm cell enters in, so that the rest of the sperms, when they come to the egg cell, try attacking it to go inside, will not be able to go inside. So one more time, how this egg cell is adapted to perform this specific function to combine with sperm cell. So it needs to have a lot of cytoplasm. Why? Because this will provide food for the embryo, and it needs to have cortical granule, which actually is changing the membrane after fertilization. So one more time, fertilization is when male and female sex cell combine. So this is just a process when male and female sex cell combine, and you get a new cell which is called a zygote. Now we will mention some specialized cells in plants. So we have root hair cells, we have palisade cells, we have xylem cells, and we have phloem cells. So we will start first with the root hair cells. So like the name say, root hair cells. So regarding, and we are talking about plants, so definitely this one will be, you will be able to find in roots. So what is the function? If you know what's the function of the root, then definitely you will know what's the function of the root hair cells. So in plants, roots have basically the function to absorb water and minerals from the soil. Now, how they're adapted that they can actually do these kind of functions? So they need to have, so this is, for example, one root, and this is like these tiny structures inside of the root or root hair cells. So how they're adapted? So of course they have a nucleus, they have cell membrane, cytoplasm, cell wall, etc. But the point of the story, they need to have, so that roots can actually absorb a lot of water and a lot of minerals, they need to have these cells which will be specialized for that. How? So they need to have long root hair. So this long root hair will fit between grains of soil so that it can reach water. Of course, the longer the root, the more possibility that water will be reached. Then they need to have large surface area. Why large surface area? Because this large surface area will help them to increase the possibility of diffusion, or how much substance can enter inside. And they do not have chloroplast. Chloroplast is a cell organelle in which basically happen process which is called photosynthesis in plants. Regarding roots, they do not have a chloroplast because they are in the soil. In the soil there is no sun, so if there is no sun, there is no purpose of the chloroplast. So this is the reason why they do not have a chloroplast. So to summarize this, so root hair cells, they have long root hair, which will basically help them to increase the surface area for the rate of absorption. Absorption is meaning taking in some substances like water or minerals. So they also need to have a lot of mitochondria. Why? Because we are talking again about transport of something, transport of substances, so they need energy for this transport. And they have a permanent vacuole. permanent vacuole is usually part of any plant cell, and permanent vacuole is responsible, or in this case, it will increase the speed of osmosis. Osmosis is basically, let's say, part of diffusion, just in this case, we are talking about movement of water in one to another direction. Then the next one that we will be talking about is palisade cells. So the palisade cells is also a part of the plant cells. So first we need to know what is the function. But that you can know the function, you need to know where you can find them inside of the plant. So this is one cross section of the leaf. So leaf has different layers. So this part here is basically this palisade layer. It's also called palisade layer, and this palisade layer in the leaf is made of palisade cells. But why they're so important? If you notice these dots here, these dots are basically representing one cell organelle, which is called, if it has a green color because of the chlorophyll pigment, then the organelle is called chloroplast. So if it has a lot of chloroplast, like you can see, it's meaning that this is basically the part of the leaf where photosynthesis will happen. So the main function of these palisade cells here is that this is the place where photosynthesis will happen. They have a lot of chloroplast because chloroplast is the cell organelle which has inside chlorophyll, which is green pigment, which will attract the sunlight, which will help to perform the photosynthesis. So plants need sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. When these three things these palisade cells have, they will be able to perform photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, what will be actually produced? It will be produced oxygen, which they can release outside, which is actually good for humans, and glucose, which is basically sugar, simple sugar, which they use as a food. Now, that they can actually do this function, they need to be adapted to this function. So they need to have some kind of adaptation. So this adaptation, I already mentioned, they need to have lots of chloroplast to absorb light, and also they need to have tall, thin shape and a large surface area to maximize the absorption of the light, like you can see here. Okay, so to summarize, palisade cells, they need to have a lot of chloroplast because this is the place where photosynthesis will happen. They need to have a tall shape because in this way it will increase surface area to absorb carbon dioxide. And they need to have a thin shape because a lot of cells can be fitted. Then the next one, we have xylem cells. So xylem cells, first you need to know the function. Second, you need to know where they are actually in plants, that you can understand the function and everything else. So function, so this is, let's say, one tree. These are roots. Something is going in, if you see the arrows, how they're pointing. So we already mentioned that in roots, the function of the roots is intake water and different minerals. So which is meaning these water and minerals will be intaken by roots, but from roots to other part of the plant or trees, they need to be transported. Like in human body, you have different, let's say, veins, arteries, capillaries to transport blood in different substances. So in plants, you don't have blood or arteries or veins, but you have something that is called xylem. One of them is xylem. So xylem actually will help to transport something. If you notice here, something is going from down to up. So it's really weird situation. I mean, similar it's in human, but it needs to go from roots to the top part of the plant. So basically, if you know that roots are absorbing water and different minerals, then the purpose or function of xylem cells will be transport water and minerals from roots to other parts of the plant, like for example leaves. You know that leaves need water because of photosynthesis. Then, if you know that this is basically the function of the xylem cells, then how they are adapted. So they need to have something that we call the spiral shape. Why spiral shape? Because lose their end walls to form a continuous hollow tube for the water and mineral ions to move through from the roots upwards, because it's much easier when you go from top to the bottom than from bottom to the top. So because of this, they need to have this like a spiral shape. They also have one specific molecule, which is called lignin, which gives them this strength and support to the plant. So this is like for example, we say that roots are like support for the whole plant, and this lignin is like a molecule which actually gives this strength and support to these specific xylem cells. So, to summarize, xylem cells, one more time, the function is transport water and minerals from roots to the other parts of the plant. So they need to have this spiral shape. Why? Because water and mineral ions to move through from the roots upwards. And they need to have lignin, which gives them strength and support to the plant. And then we have the phloem cells. The phloem cells are also part of plant cells. They have, let's say, similar function like xylem, just they need to transport something. Just they will not transport water and mineral ions. They will basically transport, or they will use energy to transport products that are made in photosynthesis. If you know that in photosynthesis are made glucose and oxygen, so basically they will be responsible for movement, this kind of substances. So again, we are talking of some kind of movement. So one more time, like we have in humans, two types, like arteries and veins, which are differently transporting things. The similar is in plants, just here are called xylem and phloem. Of course, we're not talking about the same things, but they are transporting something inside of the organism. So phloem cells, because they're still need to transport something, what are they transporting? Products of photosynthesis, so they need to be adapted for this kind of function. So they have something that is called sieve plate, so you can see like here. So they have like holes inside, like a plate with holes. So why this is important? So the cytoplasm can connect one cell to the next. Really interesting. So like a plate between two cells with the holes, so the cytoplasm can connect between them. Also, what is important for them, they have like companion cells, like friend cell. So why this is important? Because they have mitochondria for energy transfer. The point of the story, this, let's say, companion cell or friend cell, they will have this extra mitochondria. Why they need extra mitochondria? Again, they are moving something. So for movement, we mentioned that they need energy. So they definitely need some energy to move something. So these companion cells here, they will have these mitochondria which will produce energy for them so that they can actually move different things. And to summarize all of these, so phloem cells, they have this sieve plate which has like holes inside. Why? So that two cells can connect their cytoplasms. They have these companion cells which actually have mitochondria. Why? So that they can produce energy, and that then these phloem cells can use this energy to move food through the phloem. Okay, now before we finish this long video, so try to remember 3 things you learned today or in this video, 2 things you found interesting, and 1 question you still have. Write it down in the comments below and let me know what you think. Good luck.